They, just like a human being has a biological computer, we have an ethereal body which has a biological computer. The entity has a biological computer. The alien has a biological computer. And when one of the cases I had one day, I was dealing with an alien interference with a body. And as I went up light and I was reading its rights, the body started to cry as this alien entity with the body started to cry through the body. And it said these words: "They won't let me go. They won't let me go. They'll entrap me like they did last time." And it made me realise that they too are programmed, and they're programmed into our bodies at times. They're programmed to monitor us. So what I did was I added an extra agreement to the agreement which I use when I move these things. And that is that they no longer will be entrapped by beings of higher or lower dimensions, and that they are totally aware of the game before I give them their rights to their freedom. And we have, understanding that, we have the rights, when we tell them in a positive, authority voice, and be positive, they have to go, we don't ask them, we tell them. When we tell them, we project an authority into the biological computer and they'll act upon that authority. As long as we all remember that, we can clear interference out if it does come around. That's all.
Thank you, Steve. That's all. Now, Steve has been doing this for a long time. Now, how many of you people have had the desire to get trained by Steve in this one aspect? It looks like we might need it. I see a show of hands of those who want to get trained by Steve. Okay, have you contacted Steve yet?
Yeah.
Get a hold of him, you make the arrangements. Carol.
I have a question. You mentioned hell looking the way it is.
Yes.
I went to a place once where it was just grey sort of colour, black and grey colour, and the people were sort of they didn't smile, they were just hangdog look, and they had holes in them that went right through them, and they were sort of dragging their feet around rocks and things. Now, whereabouts is that?
I don't know.
Chicago.
LA. Okay, Anita.
It's on the telephone.
Is there a phone message?
I have a phone call. I'll be right back.
Okay. Doug.
Okay, as I've been listening to a lot of this here this morning, there's been one thing that I've kind of been waiting to say for about an hour or so, and I think it's probably just as well. The question I would pose here for each of you to carefully consider: we have the inner and we have the outer. We have the cause and we have the effect. We have the inner, the outer, the cause, the effect. When we start speaking about entities, when we start speaking about aliens, abductions, spaceships, and all the rest, are we speaking about the inner or the outer?
The outer.
We're speaking about the outer. Even when we're speaking about things that are not, I mean, some of the phenomena we're talking about are existing on an actual physical level. In other cases, it seems to be more of an energy level than a level of matter. But in either case, what are we dealing with, inner or outer?
Yeah.
That's very, very important for you all to understand here. And it gets to the heart of what a lot of people here are saying about how, the main problem that most of us will have in these situations is fear. Because it's the fear that creates the situation, or you could put it in grander terms or broader terms, it's the resistance within ourselves that puts us into a position where we even have to worry about all this mess. Like attracts like. If you have certain patterns on the inner level, then you will draw to yourself the outer representations of those patterns. And that's going to be true whether whether that will end up meaning that you draw to yourself a bad knee or a tumor, or whether it means you're going to draw to yourself a lot of entities or abductions or whatever the case may be. All of these things are ultimately the outer manifestation of inner consciousness. And so the solution to all of these different types of things that we've been talking about ultimately lies where?
Non-resistance.
It lies in the inner, and it lies in such principles as we've been speaking about the last 9 or 10 days here. Principles such as non-resistance, principles such as the violet flame. These are some of the things we have to look at if we want to put this in a bigger context here. If I could speak of, what's that?
Resisting our own power.
We each resist in our own unique way. And so we each create our own unique circumstances that are simply the outer manifestation of the resistance. The resistance that we have, which springs from our own judgment, is ultimately lodged in the crystalline structure of the body. The crystal works much like a beacon. It's sending out that composite pattern of thought, word, and emotion that's held in a continual state of creation by our own resistance. And that draws into us on the outer, or another way of looking at it is it causes the outer to crystallize around that pattern. And so we each create our own unique heaven or hell, whatever the case may be, as a direct outer manifestation of our own patterns of resistance. If I can speak about entities for a moment, this may make this a little bit more, more down to earth here. You can't have an entity unless you have the host condition for the entity. It's the exact counterpart, really, of parasite activity in the body. You can't have parasite activity in the body if you're healthy. Most people would say, well, the parasites make you sick. And that's true in part. But you have to be sick to a certain level. You have to be unhealthy, or you could say you have to have a relatively lowered vibratory rate first before the parasites can even start to proliferate.
Here, here.
So the conditions must be right.
Right. So exactly, you have to have the correct host condition in the body. This goes right back to what we were talking about last week, pleomorphism. Change of form of the different microbes.
Hold on now. Here, here. Are you listening to this man?
Yes.
He's spelling it out the way it is.
Yes.
Now listen to what he has to say.
On a physical level, yes, in part, parasites will make you sick. I think it would be more correct to say they'll make you sicker. But you have to be sick first, to some degree, before the parasites can even exist in you. A truly healthy body cannot have parasites proliferating in it.
Is it true then that you have to be sick before you can find?
Sick first, yes.
Sick before you find, or?
Something like that.
I hope you can have a sense of humor.
Oh, yes.
We just caught it.
So the parasites in the physical body, are they a cause or an effect? They're an effect. Now, sometimes an effect becomes what we can think of as a secondary cause. Because obviously once the parasites are there, they complicate things quite a bit. Now here's the thing. As I said, a truly healthy body is not going to have parasites. How many of those are you going to see?
2 or 3 a year.
Yeah, maybe if you're lucky. So I mean, the thing about it is you get people on fluoridated water, you got people with amalgam fillings, you got people on poor diets for many, many years. You're basically looking at people who, for the most part, have the host condition for parasites.
95% of the world's population.
Most likely, yes. So ultimately, sometimes you have to deal with the effects before you can even be in a position to go back and deal with the causes. So there are times when you have to go in there very aggressively and knock the parasites out of the body. If that's all you do, however, and you do nothing to bring the body upscale, you do nothing to correct the underlying host condition of lowered electrical potential in the tissues, what's going to be your eventual outcome again? The return of the parasites. So if you focus all your attention on the parasites, you're merely dealing with the effect, and you're not getting to the cause.
That would be a name for a great book, The
You were
Return of
reading
the
my
Parasite.
mind.
The return of the parasite. Somewhere along the line,
1, 2, 3.
You can make a film out of it.
Hey, that would be a good one.
It's learning to focus to the encompassment of all, while maintaining that it's focused to the exclusion of the one thing you're trying to talk about. No, but that is a true principle there. There's also a level where you learn to be able to exclude and encompass simultaneously. I say that only somewhat tongue-in-cheek.
When you're ready.
But I'm getting ahead of myself. Question?
When you're ready, I have to say something.
Say something.
Set up. I am ready.
Well,
Thank you, Bill.
I'll get you.
Promises.
This is an interesting phenomenon which I'm sure all of you have noticed and may not have paid any attention to it. Example. When you buy some fruit and it is clean, fresh, healthy fruit, and you put it in your kitchen as an example, there aren't any fruit flies. A fly may fly in the window, but there aren't any fruit flies around. Now what happens is, as the food begins to age and turn rotten and frequently burst open, all of a sudden there's a million fruit flies around. Now where did they come from? They were there all the time, inactive. And when the food begins to rot, they show up to clean up the mess. And that's the way it is with us too.
Thank you, Matt.
Are you putting forth the concept of spontaneous generation?
Yes. The basis is already there.
Then you're talking about how Dr. Bernard Jensen says when you go back to the healing crisis, the lights will be there. And you're saying the fruit flies, inside of the genetic structure of the plant or the mango or whatever it is, spontaneously you do regenerate the fruit flies. I had a teacher at chiropractic college years ago, and he taught exactly the same thing. And I used to think the guy was nuttier than a fruitcake.
Thank you.
I used to think the guy was nuttier than a fruitcake. Until we did a few experiments, one of which was to boil water and totally seal up a bottle full of grass that had been boiled and boiled and boiled and boiled until there's no life left in it. And then suddenly, as that thing was totally sealed, life would begin in that sealed bottle and would permeate that whole bottle full of different types of little life things swimming around there. You can see them with your visible eye. Now, with this in mind, I'd like to have Doug talk about the man from El Paso that moved down to Mexico, the chondriata, Merkel. You have that information?
Yeah.
Good. I want Doug to explain this particular aspect, which will prove beyond any doubt the concept of spontaneous regeneration and support the crazy remark that Mill made.
Do you want me to wrap up the entity parasite analogy first?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm going to wrap this up real quick because I'm programmed to do so. The parasite will exist in the body because you've established a host condition. Bottom line. The entity can exist in your auric field because you have also established a host condition for the entity. The host condition for the entity, bottom line, is very simple. It's resistance. Resistance creates a hole in the aura. That is the host condition for the entity. Whether it's fear, whether it's anger, whether it's unconsciousness in general, resistance creates a hole in the aura, which is the host condition for the entity. The hole in the aura is a void. It's a blank space. There's nothing there when it's first created. How long will a vacuum exist in nature? Not very long, right? Nature abhors a vacuum. So something has to fill that space. Law of attraction, what's going to fill that space? like energy. Not just any old entity, but an energy that will correspond precisely to the resistance within you that created that. Do y'all follow this? So when whatever your experience is out there, UFOs, abductions, and all the rest, this is exactly mirroring the resistance that's already within each one of us. So just bear that in mind. Whatever these outer experiences we're having, no matter how mundane they seem, or no matter how supernatural they seem, anywhere along that spectrum, these outer experiences are reflecting the inner resistances that are already there. Okay, John, any questions on that? Okay.
Garlic.
No, it's not garlic.
Oh, not
I'm sorry, I had to leave the room to get a phone call, but I wanted to ask, I don't know if we were going back to the subject or not, but I wanted to ask Steve about these presences that we've been having. Is there any way to tell if we have an encounter, whether it's someone who is for protection of us, or if it is someone who is a threat to us? Is there any way we can decipher this for ourselves?
Negative beings, negative fields will invade a body, invade your inlines. Positive beings, that there are positive aliens out there as well as negative ones. Positive ones will not invade the body, they'll not control the body, but they may assist in guiding your own etherical being, which then in return will guide you. And that's the difference.
Okay, how many of you have heard of a gentleman by the name of George Merkel? M-E-R-K-L, just a couple of you. Okay. George Merkel is I'm not even actually sure where he's from initially, somewhere over in Eastern Europe, I believe, but at any rate, he's been in the States for a number of years, down in El Paso, Texas. And he is a physicist by training, and apparently quite a brilliant man. I've not met him, but I've spoken to him a couple times on the phone. He's got a very thick accent, so he's not the easiest fellow to understand. He's got a couple of videos out that I have. Well, I didn't bother to bring them because they're VHS, but at any rate, he's also somewhat hard to understand on the videos because of his accent. At any rate, he has worked with he has been able to create a particular type of substance that he refers to as life crystals. Life crystals. And these life crystals, and it's apparently a very complicated process. Among other things, I think it involves leaving them out in the real intense desert sunlight for like 6 months or whatever. I mean, I don't know exactly how he makes them, but it involves a number of steps. And one of the things that you end up with in the end is a lot of ATP and GTP, which are basic fuel for the mitochondria. And I want to preface this by saying don't ride one horse, okay? I want to preface all this by saying don't ride one horse. I think he may well have come up with a pretty good horse, but remember there's a lot of other horses in the corral here as well. At any rate, what he claims and what I've seen on the video, and I've heard some pretty good case histories at any rate, he claims that by taking this life crystal into the body, you can basically bring about some very radical changes in some of the things that are going on in the body at a cellular level. And what he claims basically, he refers to this as a process of reverse synthesis. He says that you all know what mitochondria are basically? If you want to keep it real simple, mitochondria are like the atomic power plants in the cells. This is where a lot of the energy is produced right down at the cellular level. Merkel's claim is that our own mitochondria are actually a very degenerate form of what he calls the chondriana. And what he claims is that you can take the basically the chondriana are a form that can exist in a very healthy body that are capable of miracles. Absolutely growing new organs and all the rest. He's apparently been able to use the life crystals, and he's actually been able to synthesize entire organs in like test tubes by putting them in the right solution. I think he's actually been able to grow an entire pancreas from just a couple of drops of insulin, where the genetic material is there, or just a couple of cells or whatever. He's grown entire organs. At any rate, there are some people that have done, has anybody here actually done the chondriana injections? Anyone? Okay, well at any rate, you can actually apparently inject the chondriana directly into yourself, which is a quick way of doing it, or you can be a little bit more patient and use the life crystals, is what he says, and in which case you're basically gradually raising your own electrical potential, gradually raising your own vibratory rate, and eventually the chondriana will spontaneously appear in you. And, I mean, again, it's been a while since I've talked to him, so I don't have all of this at the tip of my tongue, but what's that?
I want you to go over that, Doug, one more time. This is vitally important. I might add that the chondriana, as he calls, is infinite in its creation, so to speak, and is the basis for all life structure.
See, a lot of what goes on inside the body, John has mentioned the concept of intelligence. And we've referred to a number of layers of intelligence that exist within the body. We've talked about our genetic or constitutional man. We've talked about the natural man, which is superimposed upon the constitutional man. The thing to realize is there are other intelligences operating within the body right down at the cellular level. There are, for lack of a better word, and this is not meant in a pejorative sense, but there are more primitive intelligences that exist in the body right down at the cellular level. And I think this is where the chondriana seem to come into play. If you can create the proper circumstances inside the body, the chondriana will appear. And this is basically like I guess you could say, a super version of your own mitochondria, which are capable, from what Merkel says, of miracles. Now, his method of creating chondriana has been primarily through the crystals. I talked to him at great length about this one time on the phone, and he said basically, if you took chondriana straight into the body, you would go through some pretty good healing crises. I mean, you would go through the endothermic and the exothermic reactions, which we haven't really got into yet. You would go through the real intense cold and the real intense fevers and all the rest. And so in the short run, you would get some pretty good healing results. But the chondriana would disappear because the electric potential, he used the term, I think, mainly the life force or the vibratory rate, or he said increasing energy. That was the term he used. But I think he said increasing energy levels in the body. Was the way, well, you know, it's all. I think it's just different jargon for the same thing.
Increasing life force,
right, or energy level.
Electric potential,
yeah,
or increasing the energy level.
Yeah, I believe the term
the vibratory rate.
Yeah,
all the same.
All the same. I think his actual term is increasing the energy, but he says basically, if you don't have sufficient energy levels in the body, which of course most of us don't have, or else we'd already have the chondriana, then putting the chondriana into people it's only a short-term gain, because it's going to disappear quite rapidly, because the energy levels are not there to sustain the chondriana, and in his words, they seem to just disappear. They go into dissolution.
Now, Doug pointed out, I want to go back and refer to this, is that everything on the outer is the outer manifestation of the inner essence. And so remember that if you treat the symptom, you're not really getting at the cause. You're putting something in there to give a stopgap measure to increase the person's health, which will not be permanent in its nature.
What Merkel has done with his life crystals and his chondriana, I personally believe we can do without all that. I mean, I think we can do it with things like minerals and enzymes and other supplements, raw foods, natural diet, and most importantly, love and the violet flame. I mean, using higher principles. But I'm just going to report at this point what he has personally observed using the life crystals. He says by taking these into the body over a period of time, you will basically, in his work, you will basically create your own chondriana. They will come into existence in the body apparently out of nowhere. Apparently out of nowhere. I'm not sure if Merkel completely understands this concept of where they're really coming from, because I think he seems to believe that they go into some sort of dormant, invisible state and then reappear, which is probably accurate as far as it goes, but I think he's trying to explain things on a purely physical level and not taking into account the next level of understanding there. But at any rate, some of the things that he described to me were pretty miraculous, because he said basically what would happen with your, say, your macrophages, I don't know how you pronounce that down here, macrophages, your white blood cells, is that under the influence of the light crystals, you would create these like super monster white blood cells that would be like 8 to 10 times larger than normal, and they would just be cruising around through the body, just gobbling up everything. I mean, basically one of the things that was created with the light crystals was this absolutely super immune system that could just go in there and heal anything. Just any of the problems in the body would just be, just like piece of cake for the type of immune system that was created there. And again, I think that this is quite possible to do without necessarily using the light crystals. But the underlying principle here is basically what we've been saying all along. You create the right conditions in the body, and a pretty infinite amount of healing is possible. And Merkel claims, using the combination of the light crystals and the chondriana, to have, in a lot of hospitals in different countries like Mexico and elsewhere, to have brought about some pretty amazing things, all sorts of cancers and things disappearing, but also actual, regeneration of organs that have been completely destroyed and things of that nature.
Say that last part again, that first years of...
Merkel claims, and like I said, I've never seen this personally. I've not met the man, and I've not directly got to see any of this, but he claims to have actually not just gotten rid of tumors in people, but to have actually had organs regenerate. You don't hear a lot of people out there claiming that organs are regenerating. I mean, we hear about it in body electronics, but how many of you in different modalities out there have even heard anybody even claim to have regenerated an organ? That's a pretty wild claim, wouldn't you say? Merkel claims to have done this not just in the body, but outside the body. He claims to have actually grown entire pancreases and spleens and so forth in little vats.
In a chondriana solution.
In a solution of chondriana and light crystals, basically starting out with a couple of cells, or I think in the case of a pancreas, I think you just use some insulin, from the person.
Well,
I think Brooke had a question first there.
Doug, how does this relate to the somatid life with Nason's theories? Because they're supposed to be below the size, if you like, of the cell level.
Well, so are mitochondria.
They are they?
Mitochondria exist within the cell.
And they're the same level of size and activity as somatid?
I would...
They're not. That was what I wanted
The
to...
chondriana is much, much smaller than the mitochondria. But evidently, the mitochondria are affected directly by the activity of the chondriana.
He wants to know about the
relation to somatid?
somatids, the gas undetected.
The somatid is much smaller than the somatid would be similar to the bion from the gentleman Beauchamp.
Yeah.
Hit the bion of Beauchamp, the somatid of Naissance, and the chondriana of Merkel, I believe, are all of the same.
That's what I wanted to know.
Are all the same, because they claim this is the basic form of life from which all other life springs.
Thank you.
Including fruit flies.
Thank you.
The somatids, and I'll get you in a second there, the somatids can be found, according to Gaston Naissance, in anyone. You'll find them in any life form, and they'll go through all their different, phases. They'll either go through the short cycle or the long cycle, depending upon the level of health in the body. The chondriana will not be found ordinarily. They'll only be found once you can get the light force up sufficiently. So, as John says, the chondriana are at the same level as the somatid, but they're probably like a super form of the somatid. They're probably what it will eventually transform into under the right circumstances.
I would imagine that most of us have heard that the salamander, and many experiments have been done, when a leg gets torn off, they just grow a new leg. Now this is fantastic, of course, because none of us have done this personally that I know of, but it would seem to me that in the final analysis, what's the difference between that and growing a new organ?
Or fruit flies.
Or fruit flies. And it's all the same thing. It's just a matter, I believe, of the right, what should we say?
Conditions.
Conditions. Thank you. Good.
The condition of the body, or what we will call the outer environment, will not only determine what type of bacteria or parasite or virus will form, but it also will determine the structures of elements, and this is why biological transmutation takes place. It all boils down to the change of the mental thinking, which determines the morphogenetic field, which then determines the very structure of matter itself.
The somatids, I don't know how many of you have had a chance to read the article back there by Gaston de Sands. Actually, I hope this is in the article. I've read some longer material, but one of the things about the somatids, according to Gaston de Sands, is they are indestructible.
Yeah.
In other words, you can kick, but your somatids are still going to live. I mean, in other words, just because you died, your somatids don't check out with you. They actually just they continue on. And I think this relates back again to the idea of there's intelligences at other levels that are operating here beyond the natural man and the constitutional man. Des?
Is it not true then that during body electronics and we're holding points, would it be so that we're actually releasing that specific energy, that the correlative energy, wouldn't we be releasing that within ourselves anyhow? Because it's the Kundalini energy, which is the life energy.
You're increasing the power of God within you through the pulsing that you get when you're holding points. You're increasing the life force within your body. Now, we've gone through several different definite definitions of that. Now, when that comes in, all the blockages are released, which according to Merkel, if this theory was valid, which I believe it to be, that this will open up then the somatid theory, or the chondriana theory, allowing the body then to regenerate.
So you're burning
Now
out.
take case in point, Nema. The bone structure and everything connected with it regenerated after the fire of the burning, searing pain of the Kundalini went through there, and then she went through the rest of it, and eventually the pulsing was in there. And Arena then had the whole thing regenerate. Is that about right, Rena? Yeah, you felt the pulsing in there. And that pulsing coming through there was the reconstruction of everything after the blockage was removed by the Kundalini fire. And then that, I believe, would give these little chondriasis, or whatever you want to call it, a chance to do their job.
So when the somatids then return to the earth, there's a statement I heard someplace that says something about man shall regenerate from dust to dust. From the dust of the earth comes man.
There is a belief at a very high level that when people are able then to visualize completely, a man and a woman can come together and form a child out of the dust, so to speak, and will materialize right there on the spot. Okay? And this will be complete materialization. The laws and parameters that governing this have all been recorded. But it's all done on the level of visualization, on love, commitment, intent, and so on, for that spiritual marriage to manifest another soul to play the game of life.
So this takes the place of sex?
This is sex at the highest level.
John, morphogenetic, could you give a definition, a precise definition of it? It's other thing.
The thought patterns, the word patterns, and the emotional patterns, which are the basic three factors involving all creative outer activity, by resonant frequency, form an energy field, which then determines the very structure of matter. The energy field will be considered to be the morphogenetic field.
Thank you.
Now you have to remember that once that morphogenetic field has determined the crystallization or the structure of matter, then the matter in turn is continually regenerating that morphogenetic field. Okay? Because a crystal once formed, I don't think we discussed this yet, but a crystal once formed seeks to perpetuate itself as that crystal because it has within itself the concept of survival.
You'll occasionally hear the phrase used in body electronic circles that the crystals are fighting for survival. And this is what we're talking about here. It's interesting to me because I see within the crystal and within the reactive pattern, I can see the seeds of its own perpetuation as well as the seeds of its own destruction. And let me explain that a little bit. It is the duality. The means in which a crystal will seek to perpetuate itself, or the means in which it will be perpetuated, is that as a result of the crystal, you will draw to yourself similar experiences similar to what you resisted in the past. I mean, the crystal is sending out that information like a beacon, and so you will have similar experiences. What will you probably do with those experiences?
Resist them.
You'll probably resist them, which will then perpetuate the crystal. So that's the sense in which the crystal will tend to perpetuate itself. The one little glitch in the crystal, so to speak, or the one little way that you can get through that is very simple. Those same experiences that the crystal's drawing to you, those are exactly the type of experiences that you need to receive with love so that you can actually get back to the inner essence within the crystal and blow the whole thing out. So the crystal also contains the seeds of its own destruction. And whether the crystal will be perpetuated or destroyed, it completely comes down to your own attitude as to how you receive the outer experiences of life. If you resist those experiences, you will perpetuate the crystals. If you lovingly and willingly receive those experiences, then you will be able to overcome the crystals. So the crystal fights for survival, and by fighting, let's put it this way. If the crystal is resisting its own destruction, so perhaps its resistance will eventually result in that destruction, at least if we can learn to love in the process.
What Doug said is right on. Let's look at this at a level that you may be unacquainted with. Let's take a simple structure of a crystal in the human body. That crystal is composed of molecules, atoms, what have you. And there are a series of solar systems there, fully populated by beings like ourselves. Are you hearing?
Yes.
Fully populated by beings like ourselves. The time elements are similar to our time elements relatively. And where millions and millions of years may pass by to them, it'll be just a moment in our time. Okay? 1,000 years may pass by, it'll be just a day to us. Now, with that concept, you are being a God as you think to those millions of beings existing in those little solar systems. Because as man is striving to become God, those little tiny beings on these little tiny molecular structures are striving to eventually become what to them is God, which is man. So therefore, treat your bodies with dignity and respect and nothing but unconditional love, and say, my, what a delightful horse I'm riding around on, because that horse is full of myriads and myriads of life which are perpetuating their own resistances their own survival and destruction within the parameters that Doug has established here. Are you with me on this?
Yeah.
There is no place in the universe where intelligence does not reign at some level, bound by certain limitations and restrictions. At every level you find material matter, you will find intelligence operating. And there is no space without intelligence operating at some level. Okay? Doug, anything more you want to say, sir?
In the universe is a mansion of many rooms. There are kingdoms within kingdoms within kingdoms within kingdoms. When we exist within a given kingdom, we experience at that level. And yet we remain, for the most part, unaware of the kingdoms within that kingdom, as well as the kingdoms that encompass the kingdom that we're in. So you can take this in both directions. I mean, there's kingdoms within us